What is up, slackers, and welcome to another episode of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. I am your host, JayZ, and whether you're joining me on the audio or video version of the podcast, thank you for joining me. So, anyone who subscribes or follows the show knows that I did not have an episode last week. And you might hear in my voice, I'm not 100% back to full health. I have, unfortunately, like many, could not escape COVID-19. Although I'm certain that I had COVID-19 early on in the pandemic because there was kind of this undiagnosed terrible respiratory illness that I had had back in the, I want to say, late winter of 2020. And about a month after I had finally started to get kind of on the mend is when the pandemic fully opened up in March of 2020. So I think I've been here before, but this was kind of out of the blue. I think that these kind of things do kind of surprise you because we have, a few kids, and our oldest was really feeling sick, took him in for a test, early on, and this is 2 weeks ago now. He came back negative. I think my wife and I were very confident that, well, great, he's negative. It's probably just a cold and flu season is back upon us. Unfortunately, the last episode that dropped, I dropped the Worst Gamer episode, which was on Wednesday 2 weeks ago. That was the day that I ended up getting diagnosed with COVID. And by, I want to say, late afternoon that day is when it really kicked in. So the fever for days and days, and then it gradually, settled into my chest. And now I sound the way that I do. But I'm on the mend. So they've given me a couple of different treatment options, and I'm currently on an inhaler because honestly, my breathing is still awful. So I may be wheezing during this episode. I'm sure the microphone will end up picking that up, and I'm going to do my best not to cough as I'm going through the episode. So I may have to take a water break here or there just to keep myself going. So this isn't going to be a super long episode as I kind of get back into things, but I really wanted to get back on the horse and get another episode out to all of you. So I really do appreciate you coming back, and I'm sorry for not dropping new content last week. So I was, spending some time on YouTube and social media because I didn't have as much to do during the time that I was sick. So the times that I wasn't asleep or in bed, I was, watching various different things. And what I like to do is I do enjoy reaction videos. So I've talked about doing some of my own reaction videos because I think they're interesting because you get just regular people, their perspectives on everything from music, movies, etc. All the kind of things that I think all of us are interested in that, either, for me creating the content or for you listening to it, we enjoy these things. Pop culture, it's really a part of us. And what I always find so interesting is people who go and look at things that are outside their wheelhouses, outside the things that make them most comfortable. Now, there is one reaction channel that I watch. It's not really my favorite, and I'm not picking on them. It's just these four young men. I think they're in their dorm room, and some of the stuff is hit or miss for me as far as like how they react, because they're all so different. They have different ways of reacting to things, and it's not my favorite channel. However, they were exploring different things. So these are four young black gentlemen who are, I believe, if I'm remembering, because they're in college and they're on the track and field team for their school. I'm forgetting the name of the school. But nevertheless, they primarily end up doing reactions about rap videos. So hip-hop, rap, and really running the gamut of all different styles because, there is a huge umbrella of what is popular in hip-hop. So they have really done most of that kind of content. But recently, they've begun branching out. And this is not unique to them. I think many reactors do it, but it's kind of where the seed for this episode came from. They started listening to rock music. Now, for many of us, and I think particularly this is a Gen X podcast, we came up in a time where rap music, hip-hop music, was starting to really develop into a powerhouse. It was really starting to take over the charts. And there were these different genres. So everything from your very pop-related stuff, like your, MC Hammers, for example, to some of your, let's say, darker stuff or hardcore stuff. So the NWAs. So we've always been around it, I think. So seeing young people who may have have come up just naturally with nothing but a hip hop influence and maybe not listening to a multi-format radio. And this is something that they ended up talking about, that there were songs that were obviously big hits, or you would think they were big hits from a mainstream perspective, that they hadn't heard before. But there was this one guy, and gosh, I wish I could remember their names. But this one guy, he's like, guys, you don't listen to rock music, like, at all? And they're all like, well, no, you do? He goes, yeah, I listen to everything. He's like, particularly when I'm at the gym, I want to have things that are, pumping me up or really getting me into a different level of performance, let's say when he's lifting or whatever it is. He goes, yeah, I listen to everything. So he started talking about the things that he really liked. So they take his lead and they start watching these videos. And it was the formulation for this episode because of where this RapRock Connection ended up leading. And what I mean by that is, some will say that nu metal, which was, influenced by a lot of the bands that I actually was really interested in at the time, they were the influences. So the groups like Faith No More, for example, Red Hot Chili Peppers, bands that I've talked about on here before that were really bridging a gap. They were incorporating rap and funk and different things into their music. They kind of were the precursors for your Korns, for example, or to a lesser extent, bands like Papa Roach. And that was the band that this young man had introduced his friends to. He's like, let's do Last Resort, because it has very much of a hip hop vibe to it. Jacoby is basically rapping on that track. And it was just so cool to see their kind of blossoming, these young men who haven't been exposed to this music before, embracing it, and then beginning to delve into it and become not critical. So when I'm saying critical, I don't mean as in negative. I mean they're listening to it with a critical ear, and they're going, hey, that guitar player is doing something really interesting. So they put on Iron Maiden, and I'm forgetting what song, I apologize, and they picked up on The Gallop by Steve Harris. Like, man, that bass player is doing some really interesting things. But the genesis of the episode was me thinking about how you don't have to have this separation along these different types of music. And I've always embraced the bands that have kind of taken all these things and mixed them together. I think that's why a band like Faith No More is just so appealing to me, is because they'll go ahead and essentially do any genre of music. They'll just do it with their own little spin on it. And I think that's great. So the more opportunities that people have to expand their musical palette, I just think that's so incredibly important, because there is a vast landscape, a vast canvas of sounds and styles that are readily available to us, and I really enjoy embracing that. And I really like when things kind of get mixed together. Now, it shouldn't come as any surprise that this began really early on in hip-hop, in rap music. So the first real rap song that was, I guess, most well known was that Sugar Hill Gang. Very much funk and pop, right? And then many will say that Blondie and the song Rapture was the next real mainstream rap song, where it incorporated rap into their stylings. So Blondie is a perfect example of a band that was, coming out of the punk scene, that whole CBGBs, new wave kind of thing, that had songs that were reggae covers, or very much disco styling, or just flat out rockers. And then they have a song where you have early hip hop. So they were already experimenting with the fact that, hey, there's these other things, these other sounds that are happening in our city. I think we need to explore these and incorporate them into our music, because they're new and they're fresh and they're exciting. So the next, I guess really maybe the first two big groups, well, actually you had a solo artist and then you had a group, but Run DMC and LL Cool J were really at the forefront of early hip hop. But Run DMC in particular made it very clear from the very beginning that they were interested in rock sounds. Now, part of that was they began working with Rick Rubin, who was then exposing them to things that maybe they hadn't before. But even early on, with songs like King of Rock, they were taking rock elements and putting it into their musical structure. Heavy guitars. Heavy guitars work. That's where I'm still kind of blown away about how guitar-oriented music isn't at the forefront of music today, like modern music, because it works. It really works. So, of course, the big breakthrough for Run DMC, which did two things. One, it shot them into the stratosphere as far as, a triple platinum album. It really pushed them into massive, massive stardom, but it also relaunched the career of a classic 70s band in Aerosmith. And of course, I'm talking about Walk This Way. So here we are. You have a burgeoning art form in rap that had really been around since, 78, 79. And here you are, less than 10 years later, and you're having a multi-platinum act in Run DMC who's also scoring huge hits and taking rock and rap and mixing it together and creating something that is so fresh and so exciting that it grabbed the attention of people from all different walks of life. And whenever music can be unifying and bring people from different walks of life together, it's doing its job. And certainly Run DMC did their job to really bring people together. Now, there's a line in a song, and it'll be about a group that did some work with rock music and heavy metal musicians, but I'm talking about Public Enemy had a line in Bring the Noise, which says, Run DMC first said a DJ could be a band, get you out your seat, get you on your feet. Or I think I got that last line backwards a little bit. But it was the DJ was the band, but it's rock music, big choruses, and larger than life arena acts really being true superstars and being very, very comfortable in mixing the different genres. So of course, Rick Rubin then begins working with these three Jewish kids, I think out of Queens, who had been in a punk rock band. And that punk rock band, of course, was the Beastie Boys, who, like I mentioned Blondie earlier, like, hey, this is a whole scene, a whole vibe, something new is happening here. And it's not so dissimilar from the punk rock scene. So, of course, you get License to Ill. And you have their massive hit off that record, Fight for Your Right to Party. Then you also have No Sleep Till Brooklyn. Either way, you get Kerry King from Slayer. And there's your Rick Rubin connection, because Rick Rubin was producing Slayer, because he did Rain of Blood. Not to be outdone, I'd mentioned earlier Public Enemy. Public Enemy had multiple heavy metal relationships. So early on, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the song. She Watched Channel Zero, which is Public Enemy over Angel of Death by Slayer. I mean, imagine that. You wouldn't think that immediately, that would be a great combination. But Public Enemy then had multiple collaborations with a group called Anthrax. They including touring together, an amazing tour of Anthrax, Public Enemy, and Primus. I missed that tour. I will always regret it. But you had all this coming together. But before Public Enemy and Anthrax did their joint together, Anthrax, who were wearing their influences very clearly, that it wasn't just, the Iron Maidens and the Kisses, which they said were their favorite bands. They were also listening to hip-hop, because again, these are guys out of New York who were being exposed to all these different things, coming out of the clubs. And, they're wearing Fishbone t-shirts and Public Enemy t-shirts and making it clear that they were also exploring rap. So through their different, interactions in the New York music scene, they wanted to do a song with the Beastie Boys. Unfortunately, the timing didn't quite work out, but Anthrax, a band that, as I mentioned on the Thrash episode, didn't have as many huge hit records as I would have thought as far as being a platinum selling band. However, they had an EP called I'm the Man. An EP. So I think it was 6 songs total, but a little B-side that was released in the UK was them basically doing their own Beastie Boys song, along with, what is it, Havanagila? I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but a traditional Jewish folk song. Mixing these things together with their own inimitable rock and roll style to bring you I'm the Man. And I'm the Man becomes a platinum-selling record for these guys. Absolutely astounding. But all told, for most of what I've just mentioned, you're talking about from about 1986 to, I want to say, 88 or so, all of this has happened. So right from the beginning, there were not these divisions in the rap and rock camps per se. Now, certainly, I'm sure there were purists, and there are purists today who like a particular type of music, and they won't engage with anything else. Frankly, that's on them. I'll be very honest. Like, if you're not willing to open your mind or even enjoy different sounds, different styles, I don't know what to tell you, but that's never been how I've seen things. But I mentioned that there were groups like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, so certainly more on freaky style-y than even on Mother's Milk. Anthony Kiedis was essentially doing rap numbers. I mean, he really didn't even develop into a singer, at least in my opinion, until, there were a few tracks on Mother's Milk that he really began to show that he could actually sing. And certainly Blood Sugar Sex Magic is where, they became the huge Red Hot Chili Peppers. But before that, a lot of his style was very much a rap styling. So even though the bands themselves don't really consider themselves in a feud per se, Faith No More, my all-time favorites, obviously released a song called Epic. And Epic is a rap rock fusion song. And to date, their top charting single, I think it was top 9, was Epic. Not even my favorite song from the band, but obviously that formula worked. Really heavy guitars, very much in the thrash style that Jim Martin for Faith No More as a guitar player came from, and really rapping. Like it wasn't even just a kind of homage to rap or lightly rapping. It was a fully realized rap song with a very heavy rock chorus, and that I think is 89, maybe was still on the charts in like 1990. So you've really had about a decade of rap music as being a cultural phenomenon already being absorbed kind of into the cultural landscape, the cultural musical landscape. So I'm focusing on the RapRock Connection. That's not to ignore kind of all the other things that were happening in rap music, because you certainly had your big pop, rap groups, your MC Hammers, for example, or your Vanilla Ice, for lack of a better example. But you did also have someone like Tone Loc, who was doing a little bit more of a traditional rap style. However, he has a song called Wild Thing that incorporates Janie's crying into it. One of the greatest guitar riffs ever written, because it's Eddie Van Halen. So it's really amazing to then see the formulation of the next wave. So I mentioned Anthrax being part of that whole New York scene, but they were also, I guess you can call them bedfellows with the hardcore scene. So Carlos and I have had episodes where we've talked about, New York City hardcore. So you had bands around this time like Biohazard. And Biohazard was very much moving more towards a kind of a rappy kind of... it was a vocal rap. It was definitely more of a vocal rap, but still very much rooted in hardcore. I think to a lesser extent, Sick of It All and Lou Collar definitely did some things that were more, talking, scatting, rapping than even just, barking, yelling, screaming. It was starting to gel, I think, into the hardcore scene as well. And not just on the East Coast, but certainly on the West Coast as well. Talked about bands like, Shelter and the Krishnacore bands. But a guy like Purcell was in a band called Inside Out. And Inside Out was the first, I guess, professionally recorded and released record with a guy called Zach De La Roca on lead vocals. Zach, obviously, for those of you who know, went on to become the lead singer for Rage Against the Machine. But again, I say lead singer. Not a lead singer. He's a lead vocalist. He's really a rapper. So that whole hardcore scene of the, early 90s was very much becoming intertwined with rap style. And what that was leading into was by hook or by crook, and no matter how you feel about it, it did give rise to the nu metal groups. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with nu metal because I think some of it is so very, very good. And admittedly, the groups that I enjoy the most do incorporate more of the hip-hop style. I'm less inclined to listen to Slipknot, for example, than I am to listen to Korn. And I will say it's somewhat embarrassing, but I enjoy some of the Limp Bizkit stuff too. And certainly Fred Durst was rapping. That's really what he was doing, and how that was actually capturing. So conversely, it was actually something that was being tapped into by rap artists. You may recall Break Stuff, which is kind of an infamous song because of Woodstock. The music video featured Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Eminem, because they're saying, hey, these guys are basically rapping over this heavier stuff, and this is kind of a cool vibe that's happening. I apparently had some kind of falling out, and those camps no longer talk to each other, but certainly you were starting to see, it being reciprocated. I think a lot of the times you had the metal and rock musicians going and seeking out the rap artists. Now, obviously, that's not the case with the Public Enemies and the Run DMCs, but I think that, it was almost like seeking cred, because if you can go ahead and get Dr. Dre in your music video, you've gone ahead and you've really established yourself as being somewhat rooted in the hip-hop world as well. So there are a number of bands that kind of are interspersed in here as well that I've had, less enthusiasm for. I never really got into a group like 311. They're certainly, rapping. You can't really deny that. They really were. Another one of the Krishnacore bands, with 108, definitely doing a kind of rap styling. And I guess you really can't ignore it. There was the Kid Rock phenomenon. So Kid Rock was a DJ who kind of became famous because of what he was mixing and what he was putting on the dance floor as a DJ. So for example, he would use Metallica. And I think it was most famous that he used a sample from Sad But True. So Sad But True is a pretty heavy song, right? Drop D tuning, dun 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 dun, And he was putting it to a hip hop beat, and he was scratching and mixing. And I believe, of all people, that actually discovered him was Carson Daly. And he's like, this guy is doing some really interesting things in the DJ ranks, which really led itself to, Kid Rock's whole career. And now at this point in his career, he's kind of known more as a country guy. So we could go down a whole nother detour just with country rap. I didn't really embrace country music at all until my kids were little. I'm like, what is this weird little detour? Well, let me explain. And we would get in the car and we'd go on trips. And if it wasn't kids' music, there would always be kind of a disagreement about what we listened to, even when they were little. My kids have just always had they're very independent thinking. The only channel that would get everyone to kind of sit quietly and not complain was the country channels. And I think in part is because you get such a variety of male and female voices that when you have, two boys and a girl, they like to have that contrast. I just felt like that was kind of this bonding moment for them, is that you were getting these really unique, different perspectives on life, and oftentimes very similar content. Look, a lot of country music is breakups. Breakups for both the guys and the gals, and then some stuff about trucks and some dogs and some horses, right? So, of course, I'm overgeneralizing. But, surprise, surprise, you have young men who are growing up, who are listening to country music, and they're listening to their either old school stuff, your Waylon Jennings, Hank Williams, and then if they're of a certain age, they're listening to your Garth Brooks, they're listening to your Tim McGraws and stuff like that. But if you're of a certain age, you're also listening to hip hop. I just think it's such a natural thing if you're open to different music. So in 2022, you have guys that are firmly considered country rap. They have a couple of different names for it. They call it redneck rap or hick hop, right? Hick hop. Very funny, right? Very clever. But you have guys like Ryan Upchurch, Adam Calhoun. I might have mentioned it on here before. A guy called Broadnax. Broadnax has the craziest syntax of any rapper I've ever heard. It is so country, but it is so good. The guy's flow is absolutely insane. Highly recommend it. And really, my favorite rap artist straddles the country rap and kind of old school, that 90s kind of Master P Atlanta style, and that's Yellow Wolf. Yellow Wolf, who was a protege of Eminem. He had been signed to Shady Records at one point. But he does some stuff that's very much in that country rap genre. So it's more than just what I think the stereotypes are. I've talked about how my kids are listening to stuff that I don't necessarily relate to that's purely in the rap world. I don't really enjoy Drake. He's got some catchy stuff, but that doesn't really do anything for me. Guys like Kanye are really, really talented, but I don't like a lot of his discography either. So I do like a lot of the guys like, JayZ, Nas, like the lyricists, Eminem. But I'm always more attracted to people who are willing to branch out and do things that are distinct. Oh, I gotta say this. JayZ. That Collision Course record with Linkin Park. This is a perfect example of the crux of the whole episode. Rap and rock together in such a beautiful melding, where it's these songs were meant to be together. Just that 99 Problems, Points of Authority, like, holy cow. I mean, absolutely the perfect marriage, because you had a group like Linkin Park, where obviously, Mike was doing all the rapping and Chester was doing all the singing, so they were already incorporating in all of these elements anyway. Like, that's really where they broke in with that style, fully embracing having an MC and a singer in a rock-based band. So you bring JayZ along, and the way that they were able to just perfectly align the different songs to create singular new pieces of art, that's unheard of. That's even more next level than anything else, because they're taking two pre-existing songs from two disparate groups and making it make sense together. Just phenomenal. And of course, I mentioned a few times on the podcast, there were these other really cool moments in music, and the Judgment Night soundtrack, which I've mentioned before. I want to say that's 91 maybe? Terrible movie. Terrible movie. Okay? But one of the best all-time soundtracks of all time if you're interested in rap and rock coming together and creating something absolutely beautiful. My favorite track, Booyah Tribe and Faith No More, Another Body Murdered. It is such a killer track. You got Helmet and House of Pain, Just Another Victim. What? You got Ice-T and Slayer. You have, what, Teenage Fan Club and Del the Funky Homo Sapien, or is that Del the Funky Homo Sapien and Dinosaur Jr.? Anyway, hear what I'm saying as far as the groups that came together. You had Onyx and Biohazard. Really, that they did the Judgment Night song. It just seems to be a natural, I guess, a natural progression in music that shows that anything that starts out, and I think that heavy metal, for example, at least American heavy metal, was very much rooted in kind of a either urban or even suburban angst and anger. And early hip-hop was also coming out of, I think, a certain frustration and anger, really stemming from an urban environment. So you have people from maybe different ethnic or racial backgrounds that as young people were experiencing, I guess, the same kind of disillusionment at what was happening in society at large. It just seems natural that people from different backgrounds come together unified in strife sometime. That's really when people just generally come together, whether it's been wars or 9/11. 9/11 is a perfect example of all people really being united for that period of time. I'm not trying to overhype RapRock Connection, but these are not strange bedfellows. These are all people's preconceived ideas about why they wouldn't be joined together, why they wouldn't be aligned, why you wouldn't have similar mindsets. Well, this guy's from the suburbs. He can't possibly relate to this guy from the inner city. You're a young person growing up in America, and yes, each of those individuals are facing different specific things that are related to their own identities and the communities in which they interact. But the bigger issues of humanity, what it means to be an American, what it means to be a young person, typically young men, it was obvious that there were more things in common than there were driving people apart. So this is, I guess I keep just kind of beating that dead horse of rap and heavy rock, rap and metal. These are just two sides of the same coin that can beautifully come together to create such compelling and, I think, durable music that stands the test of time. Because I think that Collision Course record, for example, that's a classic. That is a classic record. Going back to at the beginning, talking about Run DMC and Walk This Way. You can say, well, it was already a hit for Aerosmith once. Think about how the chorus changed and how how Steven Tyler sang it was different for this iteration because it was something new because of the sensibilities of Run DMC. It did make it something unique and different. I guess what it comes down to is I love rap music. I love rock music. And I love to see when they come together. But as I said right at the very beginning, watching people go out onto the interwebs, to go out onto YouTube as young reactors, and through that process start to open up their eyes and their ears and their minds to something outside of what they're regularly listening to. That's exciting to me. As a parent, I love it when my kids come to me or I just overhear them singing like some song from my youth. It's like, huh. So did they hear it from me? Possibly. But sometimes they're just out there discovering things on their own. So whether it's my own kids or someone else's kids, and I'm seeing them, blossom under this amazing art, I can't help but be super psyched about it and know that there is hope for the world. I know I've gone to some different places on this episode as far as looking at the, I guess, social dynamics of music, but how can you not have a hope for the future when you could see people being willing to open themselves to other perspectives? Because all we ever get to see is the carefully calculated or cultivated viewpoints, the talking heads on TV. That's not what's really happening. You kind of go down the rabbit hole of YouTube, and that's why I like the reactors. You see people exploring things in a really meaningful way because there's so much knowledge and information that's available to all of us. And sometimes it's not about, actually not even sometimes, oftentimes we learn much more from each other than we ever possibly could, either in the classroom. Look, I'm someone who went ahead and, has an advanced degree. I went through all that schooling, and it's great. I'm glad I had the experience, but I've learned much more from friends and family and coworkers and peers, and just people that I've interacted with. And I learn all the time just on something as silly as YouTube and experiencing things that I never could anywhere else. And that's where I really enjoy seeing people have opportunities to go so far outside of themselves in a journey of self-discovery. And I think it's just really cool. So I got to put over rap and rock once again. These are the two great tastes that taste great together, like chocolate and peanut butter, if you will. They are perfectly aligned, and I can't rave about it enough, and how my playlists are very much inhabited by all these different styles, and that's what I really, really enjoy. So part of this too is an eventual segue, and I've talked a lot about different things that I'd like to do. Sometimes it's a matter of just having the confidence to do it. It's the podcast in and of itself was me pushing myself past a certain comfort point, because you do put yourself out there when it's just you and a microphone. And there are some times that I'm like, I have no idea where I'm going with this. I'm just going to start talking about a topic that I'm interested in. Sometimes I do more research than others, but it's just putting yourself out there. It's me trying to open up different parts of my brain that maybe lay dormant on a day-to-day basis, because like anyone else, I go to the office, I do my job, trying to be a husband, try to be a father, and you try to have some downtime here and there, and maybe get some time for fitness. And, it's putting yourself out there. So to take it to that next level and then doing the video version, well, now I got my ugly face on a camera, and even though, it's not like it's got a ton of views or anything, my face is out there on YouTube because I'm trying to put something out into the world. So I am interested in doing reaction videos, but also just exploring things that I've never done before or never did particularly well. And I think that's where, the concept of the show was obviously Generation X, and I still maintain that, and try to keep it interesting to people who I would consider peers, and providing content that I think you as my peers would be interested in, topics that you're interested in. But what I think is you get to middle age, and I think many of us start to think about the things that we wished we had accomplished, or the things that we wished we had tried harder at, or really just put the work into. So some of the things that I've been working on is not really a bucket list per se. It's more, well, hey, you said that you wanted to do this when you were 19 years old, and you didn't do it. Well, what's stopping you now from doing these things? So I have a short list to kind of get started, and it's a matter of figuring out how to create the content and the time that it takes to record and edit and all that, but just doing some of these things that I've always wanted to do and documenting that journey. So if you'd be interested in content like that, please let me know. Either put it in the comments, or as I always say, hit me up on the different social media channels. Love to hear your feedback, but also tell me some things that, what is some of the rap and rock stuff that I might have missed? Songs, artists, albums, let me know. And then B, what are some things that maybe you wished you had accomplished and you hadn't? It's a perfect opportunity to do it. You know, coming off of COVID and feeling so junky and terrible still, you know, I don't even have the energy to just, you know, get on the treadmill and open my lungs back up. But I certainly have some fitness goals that I would like to go ahead and document as well. Because, you know, in 2019, before all this COVID stuff happened, I'd gotten into the best shape of my life and had early ideas for what this podcast and what this YouTube channel, I hope, will become. You know, I had that seed back then. So we're coming out of this, and having gotten COVID it's as severely as I had this time around, at this stage, I think is somewhat of an eye-opener for me of how precious and important it is to act upon these things. And I just need to do it. And hopefully you all will be along for the ride. So how do you contact me? You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube at StuckPodX. You could also find me on the Facebook page, Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast. And you could go ahead and email me at stuckinthemiddlepod@yahoo.com. Please leave 5-star reviews, leave comments, like, and most importantly, please subscribe. Subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Would love to have you along for the ride. We want to grow the podcast, love to get more viewers, love to get more interaction, and I can't do that without you. So please spread the word, and like I said, smash that subscribe button. Isn't that what you're supposed to say? Smash the subscribe button? Okay, that's what you have to do. Smash that subscribe button. All right, so until next time, later, slackers.